Big show coming up. Hammer, the Kings had a huge dub, but is the coach still in the hot seat?
Well, we talked to the guru, John Casey. 1,000 games he's called. And we talk about, is Bryce Cotton the best import of all time?
And Mike Brown, he's done what every coach wants to do. Find out what it is coming up.
This is The Basketball Show with Shane the Hammer Heel. What they gonna say next?
Yes, this is The Basketball Show, all thanks to Code Sports, Boost Mobile and the Throwback Store. Joe and Hammer back with you. And Hammer, a special shout out to Mike and the Throwback Store team. They're down in Melbourne. The Australian Open is on at the moment. The city is absolutely buzzing, and they've got a special pop-up down there with a court sports special. So if you're in Melbourne, get a chance to go and check it out. But otherwise, Hammer, how's the week been?
All very good, Jojo. Would love to be down there with Mike at Throwback. It would be absolutely going off for the Melbourne folk.
Oh, no doubt. Like I said, the city is alive. It is, I don't know, for 2 weeks of the year, the best city in the world, and the rest of the time up in Sydney, I think we'll take it. Big show coming up, plenty to get through. Let's get straight into it. Our starting five, Hammer, Scott Roth, re-signing with the Jack Jumpers until the 2026-27 season. What he's done with that organisation since their inception has been incredible. This is just well-deserved, it feels like.
Well, it does, Jojo. There's no doubt about that. It looks like he could have been born a Tasmanian. He looks like a Tasmanian. I think he's fit in perfectly. I think he's set the culture. He's recruited well. You know, he's firm, but I think that the general public have sort of adopted him as well and related to what he's been able to build for an expansion franchise. And they've had success, and I think they're going to have continued success. So this is a great move by Tassie to be able to lock him in, to be able to make sure they continue on with that momentum.
Yeah, no doubt. Third on the ladder, going through a little bit of a blip at the moment, but definitely not panic stations, especially given what he's been able to do with them over the last couple of years. The Kings, Hammer, are they back on track? A huge win over the Breakers, 34-19 in that first quarter, and they never looked back. JA with 39 points. The question is, though, is this legit? Are they genuinely back on track, or do you need to see more to be convinced?
Well, you'd have to think that the Kings fans would be frustrated, because when you see a performance like that, you're like, yeah, this is the team that was put together to be able to get this three-peat. You know, they've probably got as much talent as any team, I think, as far as depth goes in the competition. And, you know, they've been really questioned on their desire and the mentality of the way they've played. They've looked disinterested at times, and then they flick a switch and all of a sudden they look like $1 million. So, you know, I think it depends on the players' mindset and attitude, whether this is just a one-off or whether they continue to get on a bit of a roll and really contend for this championship.
A tough one for the New Zealand Breakers as well, being on the receiving end of that. The Brisbane Bullets have won 4 in a row. They were up to 4th on the ladder for a brief moment. They're now in 5th as we're speaking at the moment. How impressed have you been with them? They haven't made the finals for a very long time now. Do you think they've got enough?
Well, I mean, that's yet to be seen. I mean, I think with the amount of money they paid Aaron Baines, they haven't really got much out of the big fella. And then their imports, you know, haven't really been able to contribute. So you take your hat off to Justin Schuller about what they've been able to do, because they've got this core group that I think can move forward. I think they can improve their roster. I think what Justin's done is been able to implement a really solid culture where they're together, they play defense, they play hard. You know what you're going to expect from them. But I don't think this is going to be the year they're going to contend for a championship. But you've got to love what they're doing at the moment.
What about what Bainesy brings off the court, though? I mean, look at the way that he's mentoring Rocco Zikarsky. Are they not getting their money's worth even from that regard?
No, they're not.
Okay, interesting. Maybe one for another day. Big test this weekend for the Bullets anyhow. I want to talk a little bit of NBA now. Mike Brown fined $50,000 for basically having a video session in his press conference after being ejected in the fourth quarter against the Bucks, I think it was. I loved it. I thought it was hilarious, showing a bit of character and getting his point across. 50K, let's be honest, for someone like Mike Brown is pocket change. What did you make of the whole situation?
He got it out of his ashtray, Jojo. Don't worry about that, the fine. But every coach has wanted to do exactly this, because as a coach, you get so many clips and you sit around with the coaching staff and say, can you believe that these fools called this? And then you want to do exactly that. Roll out the laptop, exactly show the people what you're seeing as well. And he got his money's worth. He was able to vent a little bit. I loved it.
Yeah, I thought it was highly entertaining. Special shout out to the Miami Heat while we're on the NBA. The great number 3, 3-time NBA champion, finals MVP, one of my all-time faves growing up, D-Wade, getting a statue there in Miami. I mean, he's part of the fabric of that culture, isn't he?
So well deserved, and he was very emotional about it as well. And love seeing a great organisation do that for one of their all-time greats. Fantastic stuff.
WNBL, Southside Flyers owner Jerry Ryan, he's sort of come out and spoken about his frustrations with the league, with BA, about the fact that they continue to operate at their own agenda. Can you help me make a little bit more sense of this and what you make of the whole situation? It feels like possibly a tip of the iceberg type scenario.
Well, you could raffle it, Joe. I have no idea what he's talking about, but it could be about any number of things, having been part of the WNBL before under Basketball Australia. And I think there's so many things that have just been let go and haven't been done right from their head office. And we saw that from the NBL. They ran it into the ground. I feel like they're doing the same with the WNBL. And the sooner that Larry Kesselman comes in and takes over the WNBL, the better it'll be for the players, the coaches, and for the fans as well, being able to get more exposure. I reckon we've got to get Matt Scriven on this show so he can answer some hard questions. We spoke about Bryce Cotton last week. No one understood what we were talking about, but I feel like he needs to answer a lot of questions. When you're the head of Basketball Australia, there's a lot to answer for. There's some big decisions that have been made, and at the moment, I don't think they're getting the results.
Let's get Director Dave onto that. Hopefully we can get Matt on the show and put a few of those questions to him, hey?
I like it.
5.
These are our Hoops highlights thanks to Boost Mobile. The Joker is kicking us off this week.
Pass to Aaron Gordon. 51 Denver in front. 8 threes for the Nuggets. Nikola Jokic, 15.7 assists.
4. Picked up by Green. Bounce pass to Brooks, and he nails it down.
Right here in this ball game, the 3 ball has been the difference. But look at Taylor Brooks just catching a body here on the break and running in stride.
3.
Something going on.
Oh, a little bit of a...
There's the steal. Here comes Pinder. Oh! Keanu Pinder! What about that?
With ace, didn't he?
2.
Smith. Time winding down.
Oh!
Mr. Smith. Take a bow. Tassie got it in bounds. Doyle can't make the shot. And Chris Smith walks them off in Brisbane.
1.
No timeouts left for the Bucks. Here comes Dane. 3 seconds. Dane pulls for the win. Dame time is alive.
Gotta love Dame time. Those are our Hoops highlights thanks to Boost Mobile. Matty Logue is with us for the lowdown. Matt, great to have you on the show as always. You've got an update on concussions after what we saw with Perth over the weekend.
Yeah, guys, really interesting stuff, and I'm quite passionate about this. Obviously, Christian Doolittle ran into a Mitch Creek screen, and he was clearly dazed. He kept grabbing his head. He was on the court for 9 minutes, and no one from Perth noticed this. My understanding is they got a heads up through the video replay centre, and an official then said, all right, we've got to get him out. But it was after 9 minutes. Now, Peter Hooley, we all know, and loved. Like, he was in commentary, and he called it out. He just said, look, Christian's clearly dazed here. Someone's got to get him out of the game. And it didn't happen. Now, since Saturday night's game, guys, the Perth Wildcats have confirmed that Christian received a concussion, and he's in doubt for Friday's game against Brisbane. I've since spoken to Matty Knight, who was on the basketball show, obviously 21 concussions during his career, or 15 rather, and it forced him to retire. Matty's like, how do they not notice it? He thinks a doctor needs to be in the review system in the future to help with extra eyes. But the reality is, guys, Perth shouldn't have missed this.
Matty, my first question is, how did they? Like you can have a doctor in the video review system, but what about courtside? What's the doctor watching on the side of the court?
Well, these days, Shane, that as you know, there's apps and all sorts of things set up down on screens on the sideline to check, for reviews. So the assistant coaches, like the NBA, are constantly checking. And it wasn't that it wasn't obvious. Like, Christian was clearly grabbing his head. He was clearly dazed. He was looking to the sideline a few times to get subbed out, and it didn't happen. So I can't answer that, Shane. I've asked the Wildcats for an explanation, and all they did is reply and just say, look, yes, we can confirm he's concussed. So, yeah, I think this is a serious issue, Shane, and I personally believe that, Melbourne United, for example, have done a great job with post-concussion. We can't deny that. But this situation needs to be looked at. I know the NBL are investigating, but I think the NBL should have sent a please explain to the Wildcats just to say, hey, what's going on? Because I know it's not the NRL, I know it's not the AFL, but it's the act of the collision and the impact on the head. And I just feel like there's a culture in basketball that's a bit dismissive of it.
Yeah, obviously a really important topic, something that can be looked at, and of course, wish Christian all the best and hopefully see him back out on the court as soon as possible. Matty, we're also talking coaches today, the Kings. They've had some interesting discussions of late.
Yeah, like obviously back-to-back home losses. The Kings are in fourth, and there was a lot of pressure applied. They went to Adelaide, and everything was on the line, and that performance was subpar. It led to serious discussions, I'm told, on the Friday about mood. Sydney Kings coach about his future. Now, I think he's bought himself some time with that Breakers performance on the Sunday. It was a special occasion, with obviously the breast cancer day, and it was a remarkable day and a great result. But it must be said that New Zealand Breakers team were busted. They'd come off a game a couple of days earlier. There were guys out there that were not up to it, and that showed, and they're struggling. So put that performance aside. Sunday is a massive game for the Kings, and I'm told that basically the serious discussions won't just stop here. It depends on what happens now moving forward. And I think mood will be there for the rest of the season, guys. I really do. But beyond that, and depending on how the Kings finish the season, there are big question marks.
And what about the 36ers? They're shooting for the stars.
Yeah, obviously reported that, they're interested in Goorjian. Look, that's been out there for a fair while, that the 36ers would like to at least have a conversation with Goorjian. As we've revealed on the basketball show several times, they actually reached out to Goorjian before CJ was sacked. So when they were struggling, there were conversations to bring Goorjian in then. It didn't happen. And my understanding is that there's a renewed push to speak to Goorj. Obviously, Goorj has made it clear that he'll come back domestically next season. He will potentially, I think, Asia is the favourite. But you've got the Kings situation, the Adelaide situation. But 36ers officials definitely want to have a conversation with him. But I think there's a big convincing game going on here, because I think Goorj does have doubts about the club, but it's not going to stop the 36ers from trying. Club legends, guys, they want Ninnis as coach, but I think the club know that they probably need a bigger name, and Ninnis will remain there in some capacity. So it's interesting to sort of see what does happen, but at the end of the day, they've been chasing Goorj for a long time, and it hasn't happened. So, good luck.
Hammer, where would you like to see Goorj coaching next year?
It's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, I think every club that is looking for a coach is going to try and get the best, and that's Brian Goorjian. So, but it seems like he's got a love for going back to Asia as well. So I know a lot of people took it out of context when he said he wanted to coach domestically when he came out only weeks ago. But that domestically could be in Asia as well, where the big money is, and he's had success.
Shane, you're right, because I know he's already received big money offers from Asia, and he's got a long, illustrious sort of reputation there. So, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if Asia's the favourite.
All right, the great man, John Casey, is with us. Case, always great to have you on the show. We've been talking coaches, and there are a couple of positions up for grabs across the NBL. Scott Ninnis and Justin Tatum, obviously, occupying those in interim capacity at the moment. Let's get straight to it. Should both of them be reappointed at this point?
Well, I can't see a reason not to reappoint Justin Tatum at the moment. I think he's done an outstanding job where he's taken that team, and you can see the improvement that he's been able to get out of each and every player. So big tick for Tatum for me. I'd give him the job now. I don't know what else he has to prove, and they're not going to get much better than him. He's an evolving coach, and I really think that he is a coach of the future as well. So I like what he's doing. Scott Ninnis is a different scenario. Look, he's doing a great job. If they'd held on against Cairns the other night when they led by 11 at three-quarter time, or in the last quarter, then he'd be 4-3 and his team would be fourth on the ladder over the last 7 games that have been played. So a remarkable job by Scott Ninnis, but they would be derelict in their duty if they weren't talking to Brian Goorjian, if they weren't scouring the market to see who else is out there available. And look, I think Scott Ninnis is going to be involved in the Adelaide 36ers next season in a capacity. If it's not head coach, it could well be the basketball manager's role, which they're looking to fill, or an assistant's role. He bleeds for the club. He's done so much for the 36ers. We know he's been a part of all 4 of their championship. He wants to be involved, and I'm sure he will be involved. It's just a matter of if they can get a coach with better credentials than him and more experience, or if he takes the job. And I've heard Brian Goorjian's name being mentioned. Of course, he'd be a perfect fit here in Adelaide. But there are also other coaches out there that I think that could do the job in Adelaide.
Yeah, I agree with that Case. And I think Scott Ninnis is somebody that, because he has been a player, a coach, I think he has to be involved at some level. And I think he's doing a tremendous job under difficult situation. I think with Tatum, I'm not sure why they're holding back on just appointing him right now. I think if they did that, it would give him even more opportunity to be able to build for next year and the years after. Creating those relationships, I think he's been able to turn this program around. They're playing for him. As you say, I think they're playing better individually and collectively to be able to get these results. So I think they need to push the button on that and give him an opportunity to start thinking about not only making the playoffs and going deep into the playoffs, but also planning for next year.
They'd hate to lose him, Hammer, wouldn't they? Someone to come in over the top and drag him out of there. I think it's a good point you make. Let's get it done right now.
He seems happy. The Hawks seem happy from all reports. So we'll see what happens there. Guys, the foul count has been a contentious issue recently. It keeps going up and up and up. How have you seen it from your point of view, Case? And do you have any suggestions as to what can potentially be done about it?
Look, there are too many fouls at the moment, aren't there? There were 12 individual players who fouled out last round, which is the most this season. And so far this season, 57 players have fouled out. Now, that's the most in the last 7 years, maybe even longer. And it's just too many. There's still 20% of the season to go. So why are these players fouling out? And I put it on the players because they just need to make adjustments. You get 5 fouls. Even if you get a dodgy one go against you, there's still 4. And I see players, and we commentate, and we mention it during the commentary, that was a cheap foul or that was a silly foul. If they take those fouls out, maybe they don't exit the game early. But I think it's on the players to adjust. And one suggestion that's been floated is getting ex-players involved. And I like that idea. I like the idea of Shane Hill or Damon Lowry or Mark Worthington, those type of players, or anyone exiting the game right now, get them involved in refereeing because I think they'd be perfect for the job.
Well, I think you're right about one thing, Case. It's about the players to be able to adjust. And I think when you look at Bull Quoll, when you look at Alan Williams, these guys have been able to get themselves in foul trouble every game. They have to be able to adjust. I mean, I don't know how you allow yourself to be taken off the court with 3 fouls in the first half. Not give yourself the opportunity to be able to perform for your team and individually being able to get it done as well. And I think when you talk about past players, I think it's a good idea, but there's going to be players that will be fitted for it, like anything in society. There's going to be people that really fit the role. And there's going to be people like myself that wouldn't fit the role, Case. The last thing I'm doing is put on the black and white stripes. There's no way I'm changing to the other side. Cut it out.
I thought you'd enjoy that. I just threw it out there with a little bit of a bait on the end and thought, what will Hammer come up with here?
Absolutely brilliant. That was definitely my next question. Hammer, would you, however, act as a consultant in that capacity potentially?
Well, maybe not myself, but I think having past players be involved in those sort of decisions and advisory roles, I think is really important. And I'm sure the NBL already going down that track of having players, and particularly some of the commentators that are around as well, that have been around for a long time, to be able to give really good advice and make sure the league is going in the right direction.
Now, guys, let's get on to the real news of the week. John Casey notching up game 1,000 over the past few days. The voice of basketball, on behalf of everyone here, congratulations. We love the fact that we have you on the show, and I feel like this is an opportunity where we can pick your brain a little bit. You've obviously been involved with the league for a long, long time. You've seen imports come and go. Who, in your opinion, is the best you've ever seen?
Oh, it's a hot topic, isn't it, at the moment, particularly with what Bryce Cotton is doing. And Bryce Cotton is clearly the best player in the country right now. And if he's able to sustain the level of what he's doing for a little bit longer, then maybe he'll overtake my best of all time, and that's Leroy Loggins. Now, Leroy did it for 21 years. He was outstanding at both ends of the floor, winning Defensive Player of the Year titles that Bryce Cotton is not going to win. So Bryce has done it for 8 years, and he's been the best at it. But 21 versus 8, I give it to Leroy just through the longevity. But if Bryce keeps going for a few more years, then maybe he'll catch him and overtake him. We all suffer from recency bias. But as you say, Joe, I was lucky to be there in the formative years of the 1980s. So I saw Leroy Loggins up close. I saw Al Green and Mark Davis and the Alabama slammer James Crawford, who was my favourite player initially because just the electricity he brought and the athleticism that he brought, it was just an amazing scenario. And all those players would still be competitive today. It's always tough to compare eras, but those guys would still be competitive today. And have a look at Kevin Brooks. There's great highlights of his career on the internet. And if you go back and look what he was doing 20 years ago or 25 years ago now, there are players that aren't doing what he was doing then now. His game stacks up right now. He'd be a superstar, Kevin Brooks. So I think that certainly the players of the past are just as good as the ones we've got at the moment. And yes, there is a higher quality and a higher standard of the game right across the board. But those guys were exceptional. You know, Ricky Grace, Darryl McDonald, they had triple doubles in grand finals. They set the tone. They were fantastic to watch, and they'd be stars in any era.
Well, I don't think they'd just be competitive. I think what you finish with, Case, is exactly right. Those guys would be stars. The 4 players that I have on my list that I was lucky enough to be able to play with and against, 5 years with Leroy Loggins, and he was just a superstar. He could play in the NBA. There's no doubt about that. And sometimes it's just about opportunities at that time. He found himself in Australia. There wasn't the same pathways back in the 80s and 90s to be able to get to the NBA from Australia. They weren't looking at the NBL. Mark Davis and Al Green, Alabama slammer, James Crawford, they were the 4 that I had on my list. They would still be dominating in the NBL if they were playing in this era. It's a fact. They were fantastic players, and it's nice to be able to reminisce. Bryce Cotton, no doubt, is the best player right now, though.
And having those guys here, I think, elevated the standard that the Australian players like yourself and like Andrew Gaze and like all those players that came through, it made you lift your level as well. And you guys getting better encouraged kids to get better. And that's why we're seeing Australian basketball where it is at the moment in terms of being a top 5 country in the world in women's, men's and juniors.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Coming up against Al Green as a rookie was something that I actually cherished because I learned so much from him. I mean, he kicked my butt a number of times, the trash talk and whatever. We actually became friends after that. But I want to be able to say, Case, congrats on the 1,000. I haven't had the opportunity to be able to say it on the show, but there's no doubt sitting back in the lounge and listening to you commentate, but also sitting beside you and being able to commentate. You're the best, the most professional, and you give the opportunity for the people that are beside you to be able to give a great insight into what they do. And that's appreciated. And I enjoyed our time in Spain together at the World Cup, mate. The low-hanging chicken.
Oh, look, we've had some great times together, haven't we? And certainly that game that we called at Marble Stadium in 2019 when the Boomers beat the USA for the first time in front of 52,500 people. I know how special that moment was for you and Andrew Gaze. And to be there right at courtside sharing that, it's a real privilege from a commentator's point of view to be able to do that. And that's the thing that I take away from all of this, is that the players, the coaches, my co-commentators, particularly my family, who have sacrificed a lot, away weekends, lots of travel, and they've had to, my wife Collie's had to shoulder a lot of the burden at home. I couldn't have done it without them, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And just to be part of it, and as I say, so close to the action, best seat in the house, and you're paid to be there. There's nothing bad about that.
Case, you've obviously experienced so much, the highs and the lows, as you've talked about. 1,000 games, do you still feel the buzz and the energy and have sort of moments that you're looking forward to and that motivation? Where does that come from?
Always trying to get better, Joe. And yeah, I still get a buzz. I get excited every weekend or every night I'm going to a game, because you just don't know what's going to unfold. And you're so close to the action. Look, my sporting career growing up as a kid in Broken Hill, I started off pretty slowly with talent, and it tapered off very quickly. So I knew I wasn't going anywhere, and we all dreamt of being a sportsman or a sports person. But when I realized that wasn't the case, getting into journalism was the next best thing, and being able to report on it. And then commentary came from that, because I never was actually wanting to be a commentator. It was more the journalism side that I was interested in. But I think you owe it to the audience. You're there to be their eyes and ears, because you are in that privileged seat at courtside. You owe it to them to bring a passion and an excitement and take them to the game as best you can. So I get excited every time I go to a game. And sometimes people will finish a game and someone will say, oh, that wasn't a great game. And I think, well, it was a great game. And our challenge as commentators is to make it the best that it can be. You don't want to concentrate on the negatives. Okay, there's a negative. How do we fix that? Or what are they doing wrong? And just try and, build a narrative around that. But look, to be involved has just been a real privilege overall. And I still get excited, and I'm looking forward to my 1,003rd game, which is going to be next weekend.
All right, Case, 1,000 games. I hope your memory's good. Have you got a top 3 that you can think of and recount for us?
I do, Joe. I do have a top 3, but I'll preface it by saying that any grand final you're involved in is special, because for the players and the coaches and everyone at that game where a championship's being decided, this is their dream. And to see the excitement and the passion, the elation, and you're so close to it all during presentations and post-game, just to share in a grand final, every grand final is special, because a lot of players don't get a chance to ever win a championship. A lot don't even play in a grand final. And even those that win multiple championships, and Hammer will know all about this, it's just a pure joy and excitement, sometimes relief. But to share that with the players is always a lot of fun. I'll never forget the night we had a streaker at the West Sydney Razorbacks. Brett Maher was on the free throw line, and the streaker came out of nowhere. It was a big Wednesday game that we were broadcasting, ran straight through the keyway. Brett Maher kept bouncing the ball, didn't bat an eyelid, and knocks down the next free throw, which I thought was pretty good. If someone's taking free throws for my life, I think Brett Maher might beat the man. Nothing would faze him. But in terms of my top 3, they're all international games, and I think they're the 3 most important games in the history of Australian basketball, certainly the modern era. And that is the Opals winning the World Championship in 2006 in Brazil, our only gold medal at senior level in basketball in this country. More recently, the Boomers winning the bronze medal in Tokyo in 2021. And as I mentioned, that game in 2019, to see 52,500 people at Marvel Stadium and Australia bring down the USA for the first time ever, that's a seminal moment for all basketball in this country. And they would be my top 3 games that I've been.
Hammer, throwing this at you as well, as a player, as a coach, just being around the game, have you got a top 3 for us too?
Wow, come on, Joe. I mean, it's different from a player's perspective. Obviously winning, being a captain of the first ever Sydney Kings championship was something that was very special to me. And I think playing at the 2000 Olympics was obviously, and then, playing against the dream team, the best players of all time. I think when you get a chance to play against the people that you've looked up to, that you've had, and posters in your room growing up, is something that's pretty special. So a lot of dreams come true for me through all of those games.
Love that. Love your work, both of you. Both obviously huge figures in Australian basketball. And Case, congratulations again, 1,000 games. It's so impressive.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me again, guys.
Time to talk SuperCoach NBL with expert Tom Hirsch. Tom, the Hawks, they've got plenty of doubles. We know Carl Adnam is back in the league and how efficient he can be. What have you got for us this week?
Yeah, look, the Hawks are one of six teams on the double this week, along with Adelaide, Brisbane, Cairns, Perth, and Southeast Melbourne. They've been playing some great basketball, as you guys know. Gary Clark is one player I brought in last week and put the captain tag on, and then he absolutely delivered. And I think certainly someone that people should consider for this week if they can. But also Sam Froling, another player on the Hawks, that's been playing some really good basketball. And if you're looking for a bit of a smoky from the Hawks, Hyunjung Lee, the young player who's been getting increased minutes the last few weeks and averaging around 20 Supercoach points, a bit of value for your bench, one to consider if you need an option at that guard or forward spot. But otherwise, I mean, the main players that you want to target this week, as you said, Joe, last week, if you don't have Bryce Cotton in your team, you're doing it wrong. And that absolutely holds true. He's been absolutely sensational. And if you have him, put the captain tag on him. If you don't have him, find a way to bring him in. They've got a double this week. They've got a double next week. He's a must-have. If you can't find a way to bring in Bryce Cotton, Mitch Creek, another great option. And obviously with Alan Williams out for the first game of this round for Southeast Melbourne, everything's going to run through him. And he's also been in great form. And then Isaac Humphries is another player who's been doing really well for Adelaide the last little while. Does have a double this week, another one in round 18, but not next week. So just to factor that in also. But there's plenty of great options this week. Those are probably the four players I'd look to target and potentially consider as the captain this week.
Well, how else can you help Joe, Tom? Because she is lagging at the bottom. And I tell you, Derek Rucker's not much in front of her as well. They have really dropped off. How else can they improve their team?
Yeah, they've got a bit of catching up to do. I've been fortunate of late. Somehow I've won 8 straight weeks, if you can believe that, Hammer, after the awful start that I had to this season. And I'm actually sitting pretty on top of the ladder in our league right now. Just Mr. Stremp will take note. It hasn't always been pretty, but getting it done. But look, you need to find some value, Joe. You need to find some ways to top up those top-line players and afford them and support them with some lower-level value. So Hyunjung Lee was one guy I mentioned before. Another one who's great value for this week is Ty Webster on Perth. He's just about $180,000, and he's also been averaging over 33 Supercoach points over his last couple of games. With Doolittle out with the concussion as well, more could run through Ty, so he might be one to shore up your bench this week, Joe.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I need all the advice I can get, as you say. Are there any other smokies for anybody else who might be interested, who isn't struggling quite as much as I am?
Those are probably the two in Lee and Webster that I'd look at this week, just based on the schedule. And then just look at players where they might have an increased role due to injury. So potentially someone on Southeast Melbourne, if Nader's back or Gary Brown's back with Big Sauce out, possibly. Kyle Adnam, I'd probably hold off and wait and let's see if he actually hits the rotation first. But yeah, I like Lee and Webster as my best value picks for this week.
Beautiful. Love your work, Tom. Thank you so much. Fingers crossed next week is a little more successful.
No worries. Cheers, guys.
That is just about all we've got time for. Special thanks to Code Sports, Boost Mobile and the Throwback store. Don't forget about their pop-up in Melbourne, which is on until Sunday as well. Hammer, before we go, what NBL games are you looking forward to this week?
Well, I am definitely tuning into the Illawarra Cairns game. I think that's a huge one for both teams. If Illawarra get that, they are well and truly on track. And the Sydney Kings taking on the Perth Wildcats. That one is going to be a cracker. Can't wait, Jojo.
Nice. I'm also looking forward to the Wildcats taking Bullets, as we talked about in the show. It'll be a big test for Brisbane, so I can't wait for that one as well. And one more shout out, Hammer, Nathan Stremple, who's been involved with the show for a long time. He's a good friend of ours. He and his partner Kat just had a little boy during the week, Sullivan. So congratulations, guys. Enjoy the bubble time with the little one.
Congrats, pal.
Love it. Thank you guys for watching as well. We'll see you all next week.
This is a co-production by News Corp Australia and Closer Sports.